aerospace and defense manufacturing,
machines and automation,
additive manufacturing,
smart manufacturing,
global manufacturing economy.
Hello and welcome to Advanced Manufacturing Now, the podcast for manufacturing professionals. I'm your host, Steve Plum, Editor-in-Chief for SME Media. Today, it's my pleasure to be joined by Meaghan Ziemba, who recently joined the SME Media team as a contributing editor. But many of you in the manufacturing podcast multiverse probably already know her as the host of Mavens of Manufacturing, a live video series that spotlights women in the industry. Welcome to the show, Meaghan, and thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for having me. It's great to see you.
So, for those who may not be as familiar with your work, tell us a little bit more about Mavens and how you got involved in it in the manufacturing industry.
Yeah, so a little bit about my background. I'm actually an industrial tech writer for engineering and manufacturing. I've been writing for the sector since 2008. I started out in the trade publication industry with a magazine called Product and Design and Development, and we focused on how things started as a concept, went through design, and then all the way to production and distribution. And it was really cool just getting to know engineers and how their brains work and how they were coming up with some of the cool products that help solve some of our major issues today. Fast forward to 2020 when the pandemic hit, LinkedIn was filled with a lot of content because people were flocking to social media to keep their sanity. And I noticed a lot of the conversations involved all of the great men in the industry, but there wasn't a lot of women voices to those conversations. So when I reached out to the host to offer up suggestions, they would always say, oh yeah, well, reach out to your suggestions, and they never did. So I said, screw it. I'm going to start my own podcast called Mavens of Manufacturing. And it's been going strong ever since. I recently just had my 200th episode. I think I'm on episode 208 now, this week with Alicia Lomas. And she's going to be talking about coming into engineering and then starting her own startup business. And I'm really excited to hear her perspective and some of the things that she's passionate about. But it's been fun getting to know more women in this space. I've had a few guys on Mavens of Manufacturing. I had one that was a dad, and he would talk about suggestions of playtime that he would have at his house to help expose his daughters to the STEM field. So it's been a great opportunity just to learn about the different voices within the sector.
Well, you're definitely adding to the voices in the sector, and a welcome addition. And 200 is a great big milestone to hit in a relatively short time.
Yeah.
I mean, before we got on the air, you were talking about one of the podcasts that stood out with a real life Rosie. Can you explain? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so when I first started out, for anyone that knows my branding, I pull a lot of inspiration from Rosie the Riveter, because back in the 40s, during World War II, women represented around 40% of the sector at that time. A lot of women had to go to manufacturing to help keep up with the production supply while all of the guys went off to war. And I was really fascinated about that history, and I really wanted to pay homage to all of those women that took part in that time, because they really did open up doors for us who are currently in engineering and manufacturing. So I did some research, and I found the Rosie the Riveter organization, and I reached out to some of their team, and I was able to get connected with one of the Rosebuds. So Rosebuds are actually the daughters or the granddaughters of the original Rosie the Riveters. And they got me in touch with some of the original Rosie the Riveters. And I had two of them on and one of the Rosebuds. So they just talked about some of the responsibilities that they had during that time. And they talked about how, they really didn't understand the impact until much later on. And now they go around and they try to advocate for engineering and manufacturing as much as possible. And the cool thing about it is, like, what people don't understand is that some of the youngest ones are pushing 100 years old. So one of the ones that I interviewed, she actually celebrated her 103rd birthday. And I feel like that's important to highlight, because we need to share these stories and keep sharing them with younger generations so that we can inspire them to purposely pursue some of these career opportunities that we have available in the sector.
Yeah, I was just at a Memorial Day parade where they had a guest of honor, one of the World War II vets who had just turned 102. So yeah, it's fascinating to learn their stories and keep their history
Yeah,
going. And
it's so much
yeah,
history.
and although people can't see us right now, I'm looking at you through the computer, and you do have a Rosie T-shirt on,
Yeah.
and on the back it has some names on it, and including yourself. So what's that all about?
Yeah, so one of my connections on LinkedIn, her name is Rebecca. She's actually an owner of a CNC machine shop, and she wanted to inspire other women to come join in the space. And she followed a bunch of other women within engineering and manufacturing. So she reached out to me and she's like, "Do you mind if I put your name on this shirt?" So the front is, the iconic image of Rosie the Riveter, and at the bottom of the image, it says, "Be a Rosie." And then on the back, it says, "Be a Meaghan, be a Rebecca, be a Nush, be a Haley." So there's a list of 10 women on the back that is, trying to inspire that next generation who to be like.
Very cool. So you mentioned you had a technical writing background, and actually have worked in the manufacturing space a little bit, and then really took off in your current role. But what have you learned over the years? And I know you really like to focus on the plant floor and what's going on from a hands-on standpoint.
Yeah, so I've learned that storytelling is vital to the survival of our sector, especially when it comes to the general public. So there's a lot of individuals out there that don't necessarily understand what manufacturing is, especially the manufacturing that's happening in their own backyard. And there's kind of this fear with some of these advanced technologies that they're going to take jobs away from humans. And just speaking with people on the shop floor and the brains behind the advanced technologies, that's just not the case. So I believe storytelling is the key to connect those two groups of people, the people that are outside of manufacturing and the people that are inside manufacturing. And I think those stories are also important to really inspire not just the next generation, but also current generations to maybe consider manufacturing and engineering as a career pathway, because there is a lot of purpose in this work that we're doing. Like, we would not have some of the things that we have. We would not be running as a cohesive society if it weren't for engineering and manufacturing. And I think we all take for granted sometimes the materials that we have, and we don't necessarily connect with them because we don't get the amount of time that is put into designing these things that we have, the processes that it takes to put them together, and the people that drive all of those operations and design. So I really am excited to share more stories. I also think we need to connect the human aspect of it a little bit better so that people can understand that, yeah, there are a lot of advanced technologies, but they're not here to take away everyone's job. It's actually opening up opportunities for even better jobs that are going to pay a little bit better than some of the monotonous work that we're used to.
You jumped ahead on my question list a little bit, but since let's go down that path when you're talking about storytelling. Uh, you recently posted a blog entitled "Manufacturing Content is Losing Its Soul," comparing some posts to a bad sitcom. Can you elaborate on what you meant to our listeners?
Yeah, so on LinkedIn, there's a lot of content that just seems to be self-serving. So what does that mean? I don't see the connection from the individual that's posting the content to what is actually happening in engineering and manufacturing. I don't necessarily see the people who are on the shop floor and behind the scenes being spotlighted as much as I would like to, because again, I feel like it's those individuals who really drive manufacturing. And I've worked on shop floors before, and the individuals that I've worked with have just been the salt of the earth type of people, and their personal stories are really what drives them to do great work in the factories that they work in, because they have other things outside in their personal lives that manufacturing career is helping them provide for. So I think if we can start connecting those types of stories to what is actually happening in manufacturing, we get that human side of it a little bit more, instead of just these posed selfies with inspirational quotes that are behind them that really don't connect us to what's actually happening in manufacturing and engineering. And I know some people might be upset with me for saying that out loud, but I really just want that salt of the earth type of vibe connected with the general public, so that we can get people excited about what we're doing here, especially in the United States, and hopefully inspire that next generation to pursue some of these careers on purpose rather than falling into it on accident.
Well, in my relatively short time focusing on manufacturing, at least, it's always amazing to hear the personal stories. And, a lot of people with 30, 40, 50 years experience, and just the tribal knowledge that they have and are so eager to share. But at the same time, the next generation. In fact, I was just on another call with a young woman right before our podcast, and she's part of our 30 under 30 program, and I was getting to know her a little bit about herself. And she talked about being thrust into the industry, as kind of a working on a corporate project, and you know thinking about maybe becoming a project manager. But she also loved being the hands-on, being on the shop floor, talking with all the experienced workers there, and that's what she really wants to focus on in the near term.
And I just think those stories are important for people to see if they have a connection, because we all have our own personal values and our own personal experiences and our own personal passions, that if we don't start seeing that displayed or shared, we may think that that place is not a place for us to go work in, because we just don't have any connection to it. So it's really that human side of things that helps people connect and feel like they're part of something. And it also helps with the trust factor. So I just feel like if we can share more of those kinds of stories instead of like scripted content, we'll have a better chance of recruiting more people into the space.
So other than the real life Rosie, any other podcast guests that stand out? And I know everyone's your baby, and but any real highlights that stand out for you?
Yeah, so I really like Nush Ahmed. She hasn't been on my podcast cast yet, but I'm planning to have her on next year, because I'm gonna kind of switch the strategy a little bit. But I just adore her so much, because she is Gen Z, but she is really just putting herself out there. She's asking questions, she's contacting people and seeing if what she's doing is good or if it's a waste of time. She started the Sisterhood of Trade. She also started her own podcast called The Next Generation of Manufacturing. And she's really doing the work of connecting Gen Z to some of these older generations, which I think is fantastic, because we actually need that. I've had Allison, who's the founder of Women in Manufacturing, come on and share her story, because she has done so much to get women connected to other women and help inspire them pursue opportunities that they traditionally would have thought was not a place for them to pursue. I've had Charlie Matthews from Empowering Women in Industry come on, and she shared her story about starting a brand in the pumps and equipment sector, where there's not a ton of women still to this day in that industry. So she's doing a lot of work to try to attract people in that industry. I had Cara Branch come on. She's actually a chemical engineer by background, and she started an organization called Black Girls Do Engineer, in hopes of inspiring the next generation of Black women to come into engineering and manufacturing. And she just opened up her 4th chapter, I think, in Brooklyn, New York, for that organization. So I did speak with Natalie. She is a current high school, well, she's going to be a high school senior, but she reached out to me because of Nush, and she wants to be on the podcast to share her experience as a high school student in the STEM programs that she has in high school. And she's like, I'm trying to figure out which engineering pathway I want to go down because there's so many options for engineering. But I think she's going to be focusing on robotics, but she's also interested in aerospace and nano engineering. So she'll be coming on in the future to share her experience, and she just really wants to connect with opportunities, and she thought Mavens of Manufacturing would be a great place for her to do that.
A couple of the names you mentioned were familiar. Cara, I've spoken to a few times, and she's definitely a lot of energy and
Yeah.
an amazing person, and also speaks a lot to the importance of mentorship, both what she's doing, and I think there was one person in her life that helped her and encouraged her to take the next step.
Yeah, she's amazing.
And then Nush, you mentioned I think you introduced me to her, and she's part of the Sisterhoods of Trades podcast that you champion. But it must be gratifying to see this next generation of women coming up through the ranks, especially that you've had some influence over.
Yeah, it's really refreshing because, we did an event at Automate where we had two young girls who came with their dad from Canada, and we gave them jackets with patches on them, and each patch was a woman-owned business or a woman-led business. And, the point that I was trying to make is that all of us growing up probably lacked some confidence or didn't know that this sector was an opportunity for us to pursue. And I just remember at the event, one of my friends, she was just like, you were the type of mentor that I needed when I was growing up. So I feel a lot of weight on my shoulders with comments like that, but it's a good weight. And I do want younger girls to have the confidence and that security to pursue anything that they want to pursue and not be afraid of failing. Because I feel like even if you fail, that doesn't mean it's the end of the road for you. You can actually fail forward and pursue something else if that one thing you were pursuing didn't work out. But it's pretty cool to see younger girls just take charge of what they want to do and be confident in it, because I don't feel like myself and some other women part of my generation had that same confidence because we didn't have that type of mentorship as we were coming up in our career. So we're doing a lot of work to change that, because like you mentioned before, mentorship is really, really important for anybody to climb up that ladder and grow professionally and personally.
So you keep preempting my questions. I was going to ask you about Peyton and Aiden, the two young girls from Automate.
Yeah.
But what I don't think you mentioned was that during the pandemic, they started listening to you.
Yeah. So their dad, Hank, is actually one of the field people. So he does a lot of like PLC stuff, I believe. I think he's an electrician or some sort, but he would have them watch my podcast and another podcast called Automation Ladies. And I had a welder on, Barbie the welder, and also Ray Ripple, who does a lot of work with Lincoln. But they saw those two episodes and they asked their dad, hey, can we try welding? So he actually brought them out to whatever shop he has at his house and taught them how to do like simple welds. And then I asked them, I said, well, do they need anything for the welding stuff? So I sent them some welding jackets. But it's not just me. There's other women within this sector that kind of adopted them. And I wasn't planning on going to Automate this year. And then Hank was like, hey, Peyton and Aiden are coming with me for a day to Automate. And I'm like, well, now I have to go. So I talked to the group of women that I normally have conversations with just on the regular, about business and other things that might be going on in the industry. And I said, can you send me your logo? Because I'm going to get these patches made and put them on a jacket. And Nikki Gonzalez, I initially wanted to screen print them, but Nikki Gonzalez was like, you should do patches. So we know someone who makes custom patches. Her name is Misty, and she did such a great job creating all of our logos into these patches, and we got them on the jackets. And initially I was thinking Pink Ladies from Greece. And I was like, we can have like our own manufacturing lady gang. And when we went to automate, Siemens opened up their booth for us. And it was just really cool to see these little girls get excited about all the stuff that they were getting from these women. The A3 actually made them honorary A3 members at that event as well. So they're in now. They're part of the path. They're very interested in engineering and manufacturing, and I'm hoping that they'll be one of our future leaders someday down the line for this space.
Well, they're definitely off to a good start. You mentioned that you didn't really have a mentor, at least in this area. How did you get involved in manufacturing and interest in that? And how do you think, and I think we may have talked about this previously, but where your career may have gone differently if you had that type of role model when you were younger?
Yeah, so I fell into the space by accident when I was going through high school, and there was a lot of pressure on trying to figure out what I wanted to do the rest of my life. College was always at the top of the list because you needed that degree to be considered successful, and I had no idea like what I wanted to do. So, by the time I hit college, I almost failed out twice. I was on academic probation my first 2 years. And then at age 19, I found out I was pregnant with my daughter. So I transferred to Wisconsin, and that's where I found out about technical writing from another classmate of mine who was also a single mother. And when I was asking her why she picked that tract for English, she said, well, because the jobs have better potential for making money, and I'm a single mom, so I need to support my kid. And I was like, oh, so I'll take a look at it. So I took the introductory class. I really enjoyed my professor. He was really passionate about language. And our first project that we had to do was create an instruction list on how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And I just thought it was fascinating that none of the lists was successful in creating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And it really opened up my eyes on how everyone interprets language differently. And just because you think that you have all the information there doesn't necessarily mean it's going to connect with your audience. And you need to be very specific when trying to explain technical information, because if the person on the other end doesn't get it, it could be catastrophic. And you don't want that type of thing to happen. So when I got out of college and I got the job at the trade publication, I had no idea what this space involved. And I was just completely fascinated by how engineers were coming up with these designs and creating these products, and then learning about the manufacturing facilities that were actually producing these products. I fell in love with it. I did try to get out of it. I went into higher education and marketed for a liberal arts college. I was so bored. So I had to definitely come back and just keep going and sharing the stories. I feel like if I was given the chance to take some of those courses that were STEM related, like mechanical engineering or additive manufacturing or some sort of woodworking class, I feel like I would have figured out that manufacturing was the place for me to be, because I do like working with my hands. I do like putting things together and figuring out problems. But because my math scores were not to that level, it was just never pitched to me as a career path. So I feel like if I had the right mentors at that time, maybe my career pathway would have looked a little bit differently. But I'm glad that it worked out the way that it worked out, because I am inspiring younger women and even women of my age and older to keep doing what they're doing and pursue their purpose here in the sector.
Well, they always say, a great singer or a radio personality, you could listen to them read the phone book. So along those veins, I would love to hear your recipe or instructions for a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So you'll have to share that with me sometime. But whether it's a magazine, a blog, or a podcast, all writers and reporters and editors strive to be good storytellers, what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
So, as you become more immersed in manufacturing, how do you hone your craft? How much research do you typically do in preparing for an article or for a podcast?
Yeah, so I think because I've been involved with the sector for so long, the research part of it doesn't take me as long as it used to because I am familiar with some of these technologies. But I have ADHD, so I can fall into a rabbit hole fairly quickly sometimes. So I have to like set timers on my phones when I'm doing research because I don't want to like get distracted and follow all of the links. But I generally try to take around a day or two to do some really good research. And I try to connect with as many people as possible too and reach out to them so I can ask questions. And they're generally pretty good at referring some resources or sending me links to the publications that they read so I can take a dive into them. But then when I get to writing a piece of content, it generally takes me anywhere between 3 to 4 hours to get the outline and put everything together. And then I'll just reach out to all of my contacts that are part of that piece and make sure that they read it over. I don't think you should publish any piece of content without having a second pair of eyes on it, because you're going to miss something. And it's always good to have that feedback, especially from the subject matter experts on what could be misinterpreted or misrepresented. And I'm human and I'm going to make mistakes, and I'm not a technical person. Like, I'm not an engineer. So I really do need that expertise to make sure that the information I'm presenting is actually accurate and represented in the right way so that it doesn't get confusing or mislead any of the audience members. So it doesn't take me very long to put things together when I remain focused, but sometimes my ADHD gets the best of me. And I mean, this is such a cool place. Sometimes those rabbit holes are fun to fall down because then you learn something new and you have more ideas for any other stories that you want to conduct for the future.
Yeah, I think it partly goes to what you were talking about earlier, you know, posting content just for posting content. You want to avoid that, and it definitely helps to have a second or third pair of eyes. You know, even if you think you know something down pat, there's probably something that you missed or could use that other pair of eyes to help you. So I think you're on your third story right now for us. Um, one of the recent ones you did was on multitasking machines, which seemed like a natural topic for you considering everything that you're involved with, including being a single mom and with two younger children now. So did you find similarities when you were researching this topic and writing about it in terms of how successful people are able to juggle multiple projects and how that applies to advanced manufacturing?
Yeah, so that was a really fascinating piece because I interviewed companies like Akuma and Spinner who are very well known in there. And with Akuma especially, one of the points that they made, which I thought was fascinating, and some of the other companies sort of reiterated that point, is that you don't necessarily need multitasking. It just depends on your process and your workflow and how your facility is set up. And sometimes it's not the best option for you. So it really hit home on, knowing who your customer is and what their pain points are and having those trusting conversations with them. And you don't want to work with someone that you don't trust because they might try to sell you something that you don't necessarily need, and it's a waste of investment. So I really appreciated all of the participants because that was one of the things that they focused on. Like, if a company doesn't need this, then we're not going to try to sell them a multitasking machine. But in terms of like larger corporations who can invest in those machines, it's really interesting how much more productive they can be with a multitasking machine. And I think another thing that's interesting is I talked to an additive manufacturing company. So I'm going to be really curious to see how that comes into play with some of these metal machines that are cutting metal, because shaping plastic and cutting metal are two different things, but I feel like we're going to start seeing a combination of them in the near future. And I'm really fascinated to see how that's going to advance additive manufacturing, because when I first started writing about additive manufacturing, it was looked as more of a hobby type of thing and not necessarily a real sustainable manufacturing process. But more and more industries are turning to it to build some of their products. And I think it's fascinating that the types of metals that we can now 3D print, because before we couldn't 3D print some of those metals, and now we're doing it with no issue. So I'm really curious to see how multitasking machines are going to continue to evolve. And I think we're just hitting the tip of the iceberg right now with where they're at.
So one of the cool things about our jobs is that we get to travel to different industry events. You mentioned Automate. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend that, even though it's in my own backyard, kind of in Detroit. But anything that you've been to lately that really turned your head as far as from a technology standpoint?
Yeah, I really like the Robotics Summit and Expo conference that happens in Boston, Massachusetts. It's more of a smaller event, but it involves everything robotics. And what's fascinating about it is it actually connects the industry with some of the things that the educational institutions are doing. So they have a lot of startup companies that are involved. They do sort of like a pitch day where different startup companies come in and pitch their products and how they're using automation within their products. And it has really helped some companies launch their brand. So I like that kind of stuff because it explains the like how something starts as a concept and then develops later on into an advanced technology. They also were talking about humanoids a lot. And a lot of people have their opinion about humanoids, but it was interesting to see some of the work that these universities are doing to really make humanoids more independent and self-aware of their surroundings. So artificial intelligence was talked about a lot with that. Another conference or expo that I'm looking forward to, or trade show, is FabTech, just because I think metal fabrication is cool. And every time I go to that show, the smells on the floor, just, I don't know, they're really exciting. And they have a lot of welding applications there too. And I just recently did an interview with Heather Carroll from Path Robotics, and she shared some pretty significant stats about the number of positions in welding that are going to be available within the next 5 to 10 years. And it's not a problem, it's actually a crisis. And we need more welders to come in. And if we can't get welders, welding robotics is probably the next phase to help fill some of these positions. So I'm really looking forward to going to FabTech and learning more about that particular organization and just seeing what sort of demo that they're going to have in their booth.
And, interestingly, I was just talking to somebody about welding, and apparently that's one of the fields that the ratio of women is taking off. So it'll be interesting to see how that progresses too.
Well, women tend to be better welders. They have some studies out there. I'm going to have to look it up again, but apparently our stature or our makeup, we're better balanced, and because we have more petite hands, we can have more finer details in certain welding things. I read an article on it and I thought it was really interesting. We're just built to be better welders.
I didn't realize that, but it sounds like the making of a future article for us too.
Yeah, I'll have to find the article again, because they were talking about what differences are between men welders versus women welders, and there's some physical things that we have that just make us better welders.
Here's an idea. Rosie the welder, or Wanda the welder, I think will be the next big thing.
That'll be awesome. Yeah.
All right, well, Meaghan, well, thanks again for joining us. It's always a pleasure, and one of the things that I'm looking forward to FabTech is meeting you in person.
Yes, that'd be awesome.
Yes, so look for Meaghan's articles in future issues of Manufacturing, Engineering, and Technology. And for people that want to hear current and past episodes of Mavens, where should they go?
So my most current up-to-date channel is YouTube. So if you subscribe to my YouTube channel, you'll get notifications on when new episodes are coming out. I am in the process of uploading the rest of my episodes to Spotify. So you can go there to catch episodes 1 through 150. I just have to upload the rest of them to Spotify. But if you want the most recent ones, go to YouTube.
And what do you tell listeners to do?
Like and subscribe. And share your stories.
And that applies for our podcast as well. Please remember to like and subscribe. And for more episodes and other manufacturing news, please visit advancedmanufacturing.org.